Good evening. It is third Wednesday Museum After Hours time here at Wilson County Historical Museum. I'm Leanne Giffens, and we're here to talk tonight about back to school. It is back to school time in Wilson County. And today was the first day of school in Fredonia, and I know some other area schools have started as well. So I thought it would be a good time to talk about how the county schools got started and how many there were at one time. There were so many, I think you'll be amazed. And some of them had rather common names that you might expect, and others rather unusual names. And then we'll talk about some of the records that we have here in the museum that are available to anyone who'd like to take a look at them. So let's start back in 1854. Kansas Territory, having been organized May 30, 1854, its first territorial legislature passed a school law August 30 of 1855, and from that day, the history of the public school system of Kansas properly began. The territorial system statutes of 1855 reads, "There shall be established a common school or schools in each of the counties of this territory, which shall be open and free for every class of white citizens between the ages of 5 and 21 years, provided that persons over the age of 21 years may be admitted into such schools on such terms as the trustees of such district may direct." Well, 3 years later, they updated the statute to include the no exclusion because of color. So they corrected that in 3 years. These statutes set out standards for appointment of county superintendents, formation of school districts, school district boards, qualifications of teachers, course of study, uniformity of textbooks, revenues for districts, and the requirements of annual reports. Now, there is kind of a common thought that 100 years ago that you didn't have to have any training to be a teacher. All you had to do was kind of show up and the board would hire you, and you just had to be like maybe 1 year older than your oldest student, and that would do it. But there were really more requirements and standards than that, and it started very early. In 1863, the legislature established a state normal school in Emporia for the purpose of training teachers. Of course, we know that later became Emporia State University. State normal schools were also established in Leavenworth and Concordia in 1870. County normal institutes began in 1877 and required all teachers to attend the 4-week training session each summer, conducted by the county superintendent. Various levels of certificates and diplomas were awarded by the State Board of Education. And in the annual reporting, it did list, next to each teacher's name, it listed what level of certificate they had. We do have a photograph of the Wilson County teachers. This is from 1902, and this is the assembly of the teachers for their training session, a month long. And this was held at Lincoln School Building. This one was in June. And I think this note is really interesting. It says, "This view does not show all who attended when this photo was taken, as some were so bashful." But here is the group. We all have, I think, some understanding of what the rules for teachers were in 1872. You had to fire up the coal stove yourself, sweep, and there were just so many duties, and there were real strict accounting of what women teachers could do and what men teachers could do. So I won't go over all that, but rather want to focus on specifically Wilson County. The common school system of Wilson County was organized early in 1866. This was 2 years before Fredonia became an organized city. The first annual report of 1867 lists 11 districts and an enrollment of 50 pupils. A year later, the report showed an increase of 14 districts and a total of 725 pupils, with 4 of the schoolhouses being made of logs. Between 1866 and 1911, 104 school districts had been organized in Wilson County. School became a priority for the early settlers as they endeavored to establish a school in walking distance of their farms. School terms were irregular and usually no more than 4 or 5 months per year. School terms were set to meet the convenience of the farmers and their needs. Many districts operated split terms, so they would go for a couple of months in the fall or in the winter and a couple of months later in the spring. All districts were not in operation by 1911 as low enrollment and other changes in communities brought about changing needs. So this early rise in the number of pupils and the number of districts really is reflective of the settlement that was taking place. It wasn't that some kids were going to school and some were not. It was just that there were more children as the counties, the townships became more settled. Over the years, some districts consolidated on their own, partly for financial reasons. As late as 1942, there were still 84 rural districts in the county. Average enrollment in the operating districts in 1942 was 11 pupils. In the early 1920s, the small towns established high schools, some operating only 2 or 3 year high school programs. Well, eventually, the Kansas legislature got involved and enacted school unification laws in 1965. So this is when the 3 unified school districts in the county, Altoona, Neodesha, and Fredonia, came to be. At the time of unification in 1966, only 1 school district had remained intact since its organization in 1866. Anybody know? For 100 years, no territory had been added or detached. That district was New Albany District Number 9, which at one time had operated a 2-year high school. Now we have a map that was drawn by Herbert Payton showing school districts in the county in 1914, and I think it shows 103 of the 104 districts. And you see circled kind of in yellow there, you see Fredonia, Altoona, and Neodesha. I came across the 1882 school census in Wilson County, and this was for students ages 5 to 21. The number of the scholars, 5,395. Average daily attendance, 2,354. Number of school buildings and rooms, 96 buildings with 108 rooms. And at that time there were 100 school districts. Number of teachers was almost evenly divided between male and female. 64 male, 67 female. And this is interesting and not surprising from what we know. The salary of the teachers per month. The male teachers got $31.04 per month, and the female teachers got $24.47. And I'll leave my editorial comment to myself. So I talked a little bit about the growth of the school districts up to a high of 104, and we see that that very quickly happened when it started in 1867 with 11 school districts, and just really about 20 years later, in 1889, there were 102 school districts. So everybody was wanting one, and if you look at some of those early maps, you'll see a school about every 2 miles. They wanted them within walking distance. So, how did these school districts acquire their names? Well, several school districts had the same name. Some adopted rather unique names. Some were named for geographic features, the area, the towns, the name of the persons providing the land for the school, creeks that were nearby, and so on. And some schools were known by several different names, adding to the challenge of compiling an accurate list. In 1887, there was a school close to Vilas that was called Peach Grove, and it was named after a peach orchard that was on the Doolin farm to the northwest. So, schools with duplicate names. Bell School, there were two of them. There were two Bethel schools. There was a North Brown and South Brown, North Clark and South Clark, two Fairviews, two Grandviews, two Green Valley schools, and four Maple Grove schools. I think the most well-known one is the one that was west of town, a fairly good-sized brick structure that is now a private residence, and it is one of the very few structures that formerly was a school building that's still in existence in the county. But it was only one of four Maple Grove schools. There was a West Rainbow and an East Rainbow, 3 Star schools, 2 Stone schools, and 2 Woodson Joint, which is kind of an unusual name. Some of the other unusual names: Butcher, Coon Hollow, 5 Mounds, Gravel Hill, which was close to Guilford, Hardscrabble, Humpback, Needmore, Olive Branch, Scrub Oak, Sipple, that's S-I-P-P-L-E, Sipple, Taller Ridge, Tater Hill, and Tenpenny. So what kind of reporting happened each year? Well, there were annual reports that were required. These were published every year, and they had the school statistics. They had the name of the superintendents, the teachers, the salaries, the length of the school terms, the mill levies assessed, and that sort of thing. And we do have a number of those. We actually have a fairly complete collection of them. The one I'll share with you is from 1952 to 1953. So it lists all of the schools and the officers, subjects that are taught in the schools, teachers' names, their certification, gets into the financial data of the school, yearly salaries, years of experience of the teachers. So all of that information was to be in an annual directory. Then we have, here in the museum, we have some of the Wilson County School annuals. And this was a little bit different kind of reporting because it was a collection of reporting from the school, kind of more showing the activity of the school. So it would list the name of the school, like Morgan Valley, District 13, the names of the pupils that were in the school, the teachers' names, school board names. Then it gets into the fun details, their projects and entertainments, activities, special events that took place, little descriptors, and it's just a guess on my part, but I'm thinking that they will have put a lot of the good stuff and left out some of the things that didn't work quite so well or were activities that failed. But I was amused by this one from East Rainbow, District 38, and this is again 1937. And under activities, they talk about some of their ball games, playing ball games. They took a trip to the water and power plant, which was very interesting. While there, we saw the old flour mill, their 2 electric pumps, 4 diesel engines, and dynamos. Also, we visited the refinery and saw how they refine oil. On the West Mound at Fredonia, we enjoyed a picnic. We watched men at work at the brick plant, which was very interesting. We hiked over the mound, then built a fire and ate our lunch. We had several community meetings this year. Some were very good, and some not so good. We also had a pie supper and a Christmas program. So these make for interesting reading. We also have a fair amount of memorabilia from the various country schools or one-room schools, the little districts. It was typical at the end of the year that there would be a school-wide picnic and that students would get some kind of a souvenir, a little booklet, and it might have some poems in it. It would have a list of the pupils and the teachers' names. This one, I believe, is from 1913 to 14. The teacher was Delmont Cook, and this was in Duck Creek Township. I believe it was LaFountain. So it lists some of the last names: Marlette, Lothar, Maxwell, Olinger. So we have a number of these little souvenirs. We also have quite a collection of the commencement invitations and programs. This is one of the earliest ones from 1901. Some of the earliest commencements we know were held at the Opera House, because that was the largest auditorium in town. Then we have, when many of these school districts closed, the schools closed, what did they do with all those records, the financial records, and in some cases the student records? Well, some of those things ended up here at the museum. So we have books like this, which are simply accounting books, where you're going to see things like teachers' names, salaries. You may find how much they spent on a fire extinguisher, how much they paid the janitors, all that kind of information. So we have a lot of that sort of thing. But the largest thing that we have is photos. And so I'm going to share some of those with you. We have photos of buildings. And this one I'll start with is Bethel School, District 31. This photo is from 1929. Newland School, District 79. Clark School, District 50. Some of these buildings were grander than others, obviously, and it probably had a lot to do with the wealth of that particular township or that particular district. Stone School, District 24, and we get an idea here of what recess would have been like. Coyville, of course, had a larger school. This was from 1964. Mound School here in Fredonia, and with their new addition, I don't have a date on this. Some of you watching may have a little better idea of when this might be. Then we have a good number of photos of the individual kids or their classes. So this is from Bethel District 31 in 1924. Mound School students. Here we see the interior of the classroom. Looks like a lot of kids in one room. Bell School, District 70, just north of LaFountain. The Shirley District, 75, in the far northeast corner of Wilson County. Campbell, District 11, and the teacher was Miss Dye in 1900. I always think it's telling in the photographs, the clothing that the children are wearing, and some of them are wearing shoes. Sometimes they're not, which tells you a little bit. This is Marino School in 1893. Fredonia graduating class, 1892, so this is one of the earlier ones. In 1903. Fredonia High School graduation at the Hudson Opera House. This was in 1902. We don't have very many photographs of the interior of the Hudson Opera House, so this is kind of a special one. Well, then we have photographs of some of the sports activities, and we have the Fredonia baseball team in 1910. In 1911, the Altoona girls basketball team, and look at these outfits. course, I'm guessing the game was a little slower than the games are played now. We have photographs of individuals. Here's a photograph of Dean Pryor, who in 1948 and 49 was a decathlon participant in the Olympics. Coyville School Students and Activities in 1952-53. Teachers, coaches, and administration, and we have photographs of them as well. These are Mound school teachers of various years. Football coaches Roy Long and Cease Pryor, 1947-48. And I'd be remiss if we did not include Max Wilson. This picture was taken about 1960. Now I should mention that I've been sharing copies that are of lesser quality, but all of these photos have been scanned. We have over almost 600 photos of schools, school buildings, school teams, school classes, and students in our collection, and those have all been scanned, and you're welcome to come in and take a look at any of the things that I've shared with you, the types of records that we have. I also want to tell you about something that we're rather excited about. We recently had a donation from the estate of Margaret Ann Hull, and she was a researcher who was very interested in the history of the small schools in southeast Kansas. And so she gathered all of this information, newspaper clippings and copies of the annuals and directories I've shown to you, and she put together this pictorial journey through the schools of southeast Kansas, 1863 to 2004. And it's a rather large notebook, and we're happy to share that. We are just really thrilled that her family chose to share that with us. So we have a lot of that sort of thing. I want to finish off tonight with something I came across that was in one of the school directories from actually over 50 years ago. It was from the 1967-68 Educational Directory here in Wilson County, and it's a teacher's credo. This I believe, that when we choose to teach, we choose to serve. That this generation of children and youth is just as fine as your generation or mine. Wholesale indictment of youth, dates 1. That every child is entitled to the best we have to give, regardless of his personality, his mentality, or his situation. That we must bring every bit of training and intelligence and faith we bear upon our problem children, or rather, our children with problems. That youth is not necessarily the happiest time of the life. Many children face situations that an adult would find it difficult to meet, and they have as yet no philosophy of life. That our discipline should be firm, consistent, and constructive. We should never administer discipline when we are emotionally disturbed ourselves. Punishment should not be a relief valve for our pent-up feeling. We should never leave a child flat. Instead, we should send him away feeling that he is a fine person who has made a mistake. That we should remember that kindness and consideration and trust are not a sign of weakness in a teacher. That children are hurt by the same things that hurt us: sarcasm and ridicule. That we should not exact a higher standard of conduct in matters of punctuality, responsibility, and self-control than we possess ourselves. That it is just as unprofessional to discuss our pupils as it is for a doctor to discuss his patients. That at the close of each year, we should pass our youngsters on with a test record, a scholastic record, a health record, but not a conduct record. Give them a clean sheet and a fresh start. That the school should be one place where every child feels wanted, where the insecure can find a measure of security, where his confidences are not betrayed, and where all can look for help. that we have limitless opportunities to touch lives for good, that we should treat every child as if he were our own, that we should pray for an understanding heart. And this is attributed to educator M. Jane Harrower. And I think it really says a lot to anyone who works with children in any capacity, and sets the standard very high for all of us in giving children what they deserve. So I wish to thank you all for joining us for this program, and wish you all a great school year. See you next time.